Mobili. Top 7 superbikes from the 1980s that are now worth a fortune. The 1980s were important years for the sport bike class, as it saw some epic motorcycles from nearly all brands. If the sports bikes of the 1980s seem crude by today's standards, they are very much the best of their time and, as a result, are becoming increasingly collectible. That's our focus for today, and here are 10 of the best ones. 7. Suzuki GSX-R750 Katana, 1982. The Suzuki GSX-R750 Katana was nothing out of the ordinary for the time, with a large 1075cc, 111 horsepower, inline 4-cylinder engine. But it was the skin that was so remarkable. In 1980, Suzuki's motorcycles suffered from, in the company's own words, warehouse styling, with little company identity differentiating it from other Japanese motorcycles. Suzuki then turned to Hans Muth, the styling genius behind the BMW R90S, R100RS with its sculpted fairing, and the original R80 GS, which had turned around BMW's fortunes. What Muth came up with for the Katana looked like nothing else in motorcycling at the time. All straight lines and angles, with a rectangular headlight, and a seat that formed part of the overall style, rather than just being an afterthought. Opinion on the styling was, and still is, divided, but there's no denying it was distinctive. What wasn't in doubt was its performance. It was the fastest 1,000 cubic centimeters production motorcycle cycle world had ever tested to that point. 6. Kawasaki GPZ 750 Turbo, 1984. Sports motorcycle design is largely centered around the pursuit of more and more power, and, in the early 1980s, that meant bolting a turbocharger to an existing engine to boost power. And reduced the development costs of an entirely new engine, of course. Kawasaki was behind its Japanese rivals in bringing a turbo bike to the public, but this delay served it well. By mounting the turbo in front of the 738 cubic centimeters, 4-cylinder engine, close to the exhaust ports, turbo lag was kept to a minimum and a power output of 112 horsepower was excellent for the time, giving the GPZ 750 turbo performance on par with its own GPZ 1100. If the rest of the bike was largely conventional, and the turbo added 30 pounds to the weight, an additional 35 horsepower more than made up for it. 5. Suzuki GSX-R750, 1985. Perhaps the most obvious entry in this list, the Suzuki GSX-R750 was arguably the motorcycle that set the template for every sports bike to come. It was one of the first road bikes to utilize an aluminum beam frame, giving unprecedented chassis stiffness, essential for good handling. This is something Japanese motorcycles had not always been known for at the time. The fairing and bodywork design was distinctive and efficient, but it was the engine that was the real talking point. A 749 cubic centimeters inline 4-cylinder, featuring air and oil cooling and developing an impressive for the time 106 horsepower, giving a top speed of 145 miles per hour, derived directly from Suzuki racing bikes, the Gixxer was on its way to becoming a legend. 4. Ducati 851 to 1987. By the 1980s, Ducati was in financial trouble, while its range of V-twin-engine motorcycles was losing out in the performance stakes to the Japanese manufacturers. A buyout by Cagiva gave the injection of cash Ducati needed to completely revamp its model lineup, and the first point of order was to get more power out of the engine. New 4-valve Desmodromic cylinder heads were designed, along with liquid cooling for the whole engine, and this bumped power output to 93 horsepower. The resulting 851 model began the turnaround in Ducati's fortunes, helped by Raymond Roche winning the 1990 World Superbike Championship on one, kicking off a decade of dominance of the series by Ducati. The 851 set the template for every Ducati superbike from that moment on, with its powerful, fast, and utterly beautiful character. 3. Honda CB1100R 1980. This was the first homologation special from Honda. Based on the CB900F, the CB1100R, R4 Racing, was a fully faired road-legal model built in sufficient numbers to classify as a production model eligible for racing in Europe, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. 3 versions were built, B, C, and D, which were sufficiently different in the fairing departments for none of the fairing parts to be interchangeable between them. The inline 4-cylinder engine produced 115 horsepower, a very good figure for the day, although its weight was a slightly porky 518 pounds. If it didn't have any of the exotic materials that mark out homologation specials in the 2000s, it was still an important stepping stone on the way to the immortal Fireblade. 2. Yamaha FZR750 RR 1985. A homologation special built in order to go head-to-head with Honda's RC30 and Bimota's YB4 in World Superbike racing. 1,000 FZR750 RRs were built and, if they cost a fortune at the time, it was a price many teams were prepared to pay for a ready-to-race sports bike. If it has lights and mirrors, these are merely there as window dressing. Remove the lights and mirrors, fit the optional race kit, and you have a bike that can compete against the best in the world. Fitted with Yamaha ZX-UP, exhaust ultimate power valve, the torque curve was remarkably flat for an engine tuned for top-end power and torque, while the chassis was optimized to be stiff and quick steering. 1. Honda VFR 750 RR-C30 1987. Once the World Superbike Championship was inaugurated, the manufacturers saw an opportunity to properly use racing to promote their road-going bikes in a way that Grand Prix racing never could. There was a series that raced bikes just like the ones you could buy in a showroom. Honda, never a company to do things by half, built the RC30 as a homologation special for the series, and only 3,000 were ever built. The V4 engine featured gear-driven double overhead camshafts and titanium connecting rods, producing 120 horsepower and driving through a close-ratio gearbox, with first gear good for 82 miles per hour. It worked perfectly, with American Fred Merkel winning the first 2 editions of the World Superbike Championship in 1988 and 1989. Rare and expensive when new, it is even rarer and more expensive today, if you can find one.
I hope to inspire you and help you learn more about your favorite theme. Subscribe to my channel and let me know what you think.